dead in the water. Murder, mayhem, and a dachshund, detective on the case. Paws and Alibis Mystery, Book 1, by Win Valentine. Copyright 2025 by Win Valentine. All rights reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced in any form or by any electronic or mechanical means, including information storage and retrieval systems, without written permission from the author, except for the use of brief quotations in a book review. This novel is entirely a work of fiction. The names, characters, and incidents portrayed in it are the work of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, events or localities is entirely coincidental. Win Valentine asserts the moral right to be identified as the author of this work. Designations used by companies to distinguish their products are often claimed as trademarks. All brand names and product names used in this book and on its cover are trade names, service marks, trademarks, and registered trademarks of their respective owners. The publishers in the book are not associated with any product or vendor mentioned in this book. None of the companies referenced within the book have endorsed the book. Book cover by Dana Sacco, formatted with vellum. Chapter 1. Morning Routines. 6 months in paradise, and Ruby Castellano had developed what could generously be called a routine. Less generously, it could be called a rut, but the coffee was good and nobody expected her to make small talk before 9 a.m., so she was calling it a win. The usual? Stella Fernandez asked as Rue pushed through the door of Harbor Grounds, Copper trotting beside her with the confidence of a dog who knew exactly where he was going and why. Please, and maybe one of those blueberry muffins that definitely aren't good for me. Coming right up, honey. 6 months ago, Rue would have bristled at being called honey by someone she barely knew. Now she found it oddly comforting, like being wrapped in a warm blanket that smelled like espresso and fresh pastry. Harbor Grounds occupied a narrow storefront on the main drag, wedged between a bookstore and a shop that sold overpriced beach towels to tourists. The walls were covered with local art and faded photographs of Pelican Cove's fishing fleet from decades past, when the harbor had been about work instead of pleasure craft. Copper settled into what had become his usual spot by the front window, where he could keep an eye on the street traffic while still monitoring the pastry case for any signs of fallen muffin crumbs. At 8 months old, he'd grown into his ears and developed opinions about their daily routes through town. This morning, he'd led her past the Marina instead of straight down Harbor Street, which meant he'd either spotted something interesting or was feeling philosophical about seagulls. With Copper, it could go either way. How's the new design project coming along? Stella asked, sliding Rue's coffee across the counter along with a muffin that looked suspiciously larger than what she'd paid for. Good. The client actually knows what they want, which is refreshing. Rue settled into her regular table, third from the window, close enough to eavesdrop, but far enough from the counter to avoid getting dragged into conversations. Though they did ask if I could make their logo more Florida. I'm still trying to figure out what that means. Palm trees? That was my first guess. Or possibly a flamingo. Flamingos are more Miami. Here it's all about the pelicans and the fishing boats. Rue was contemplating the design implications of pelican imagery when the bell above the door chimed and Jake Torino walked in, looking like he'd already been up for hours. Which, knowing Jake, he probably had. Veterinarians apparently didn't get to ease into their mornings with coffee and people watching. Morning, ladies. He nodded to Stella, then looked at Rue with the kind of smile that had probably caused trouble in high school. Mind if I join you? Mrs. Patterson canceled her appointment, so I have a few minutes before the next emergency iguana situation. Another iguana situation? You'd be surprised how often it comes up. Yesterday it was Mr. Rodriguez's pet that turned out to be pregnant. Today it's Mrs. Vega's backyard visitor that won't leave her garden alone. Jake settled into the chair across from her, and Copper immediately got up to investigate his pockets for treats. Fair warning, I told her that wild iguanas don't need wellness exams, but she's convinced this one is different. Different how? Apparently it watches her through the kitchen window while she cooks. She thinks it's judging her meal choices. Rue laughed despite herself. Well, is it? Probably. Iguanas are surprisingly opinionated creatures. Jake accepted his coffee from Stella with the easy familiarity of someone who'd been coming here since childhood. But between you and me, Mrs. Vega makes excellent fish tacos, so the iguana's got good taste. These Tuesday morning coffee meetings had started accidentally. Jake had been grabbing coffee after an early emergency call. Rue had been in her usual spot, and somehow they'd ended up sharing a table and 20 minutes of surprisingly easy conversation. No pressure, no expectations, just two people who happened to be awake before the rest of the town and had developed a mutual appreciation for Stella's coffee and each other's company. It was exactly the kind of low-key friendship Rue had decided she could handle. Jake never pushed for more personal information than she was willing to give, never suggested dinner plans or weekend activities, never made her feel like she was disappointing him by keeping things light. Perfect for someone who'd moved to Florida specifically to avoid complicated relationships. "So, what's the plan for today?" Jake asked, breaking off a piece of his own muffin to offer to Copper, who accepted it with the dignity of a dog receiving his due tribute. "Finish the logo project, maybe unpack another box or two. Living dangerously as always." Rue wrapped her hands around her coffee mug, enjoying the warmth despite the fact that it was already 75 degrees outside. "What about you?" More iguana counseling. "Actually, I'm thinking about checking out the Yacht Club's regatta setup this afternoon. You know they're having their big monthly race this weekend?" Rue had heard about the regatta. It was hard to avoid hearing about it, since the Pelican Cove Yacht Club seemed to consider their monthly racing series the social event of the century. The local newspaper had been running breathless coverage for weeks, complete with photos of expensive boats and quotes from the club's commodore about upholding maritime traditions and bringing prestige to our beautiful coastal community. "Not really my scene," Rue said. "I don't know anything about boats, and I definitely don't own the right clothes for yacht club social events." "It's not as fancy as it sounds. Old Florida Yacht Club, not Miami Yacht Club. More about the sailing than the social status." Jake paused, looking like he was considering his next words carefully. "I was thinking of volunteering to help with medical coverage for the race. They always need someone around in case of accidents, and it's good for business. Half the boat owners in town are my clients." "Makes sense. Want to come with me this afternoon?" "Just to check out the setup, maybe meet some of the people. Fair warning, though. The Commodore can be a bit much, but most of the members are pretty down to earth." Rue studied Jake's face, looking for signs that this was more than a casual invitation to tag along while he scoped out potential business opportunities. But his expression was the same easy, no-pressure demeanor he always maintained, just a friend suggesting a way to spend a Tuesday afternoon that might be more interesting than unpacking boxes. "I guess I could take a look," she said. "Copper would probably enjoy seeing all the boats." As if summoned by his name, Copper looked up from where he'd been investigating the crumbs under their table and wagged his tail once. The gesture managed to convey both agreement with the boat plan and mild disappointment that there weren't more muffin pieces forthcoming. "Great. I'll pick you up around 3? After Jake left to deal with Mrs. Vega's judgmental iguana, Rue lingered over her coffee and watched the morning foot traffic on Harbor Street. Pelican Cove was coming alive for another day of small-town Florida life. Shop owners opening their doors, early retirees heading out for their power walks, fishing boats returning from their dawn excursions. The rhythm of it had grown familiar over the past 6 months, comfortable in a way she hadn't expected. When she'd first arrived, she'd assumed the town would feel claustrophobic after Chicago. Too small, too slow, too invested in everyone else's business. Instead, she'd found something she hadn't realized she'd been looking for, a place where people knew her name but didn't demand her life story, where she could be part of the community without losing herself in it. Or at least, that's what she'd been telling herself. The truth was probably more complicated, but Rue had gotten good at avoiding complicated truths over the past few years. "Ready to head home, Detective?" she asked Copper, who immediately went to the door and sat down with the kind of patient expectation that suggested he'd been waiting for her to catch up to his schedule. The walk back to her cottage took them past the Marina, where boats bobbed gently in their slips, and the morning sun turned the water into a mirror of blues and silvers. Copper paused at the harbor overlook, his nose working overtime to process all the interesting smells carried on the sea breeze. Pelican Cove's harbor was a mix of working boats and pleasure craft, from serious fishing vessels that went out before dawn to elegant sailboats that probably cost more than Rue's Chicago condo had. She'd never paid much attention to the yacht club before. It occupied a prime piece of waterfront real estate at the north end of the harbor, with a clubhouse that looked like it had been built in the 1940s and updated just enough to keep the health department happy. From the outside, it looked more like a well-maintained beach house than the exclusive social fortress she'd imagined. Maybe Jake was right about it being more old Florida than Miami pretentious. Maybe an afternoon watching boat preparations wouldn't be the social nightmare she'd automatically assumed it would be. "What do you think, buddy?" she asked Copper, who was still studying the harbor with the intense concentration he usually reserved for tracking interesting scents. Ready to learn about yacht racing? Copper's tail wagged once, but his attention remained focused on the water. Whatever he was sensing out there, it had captured his interest completely. Probably just fish, Rue said, tugging gently on his leash. Come on, let's go home. We've got a logo to finish before our nautical adventure. As they headed back toward her cottage, Rue found herself looking forward to the afternoon's plans. Not because she had any particular interest in boats or yacht clubs, but because Jake's company had become one of the unexpected bright spots in her new life. Their easy friendship was exactly what she needed. Uncomplicated, undemanding, and refreshingly free of the kind of drama that had driven her to Florida in the first place. Back at the cottage, she settled onto her screened porch with her laptop and started sketching pelican silhouettes for the logo project. Copper curled up in his favorite sunny spot, apparently exhausted from his morning of coffee shop supervision and harbor reconnaissance. Just a quiet afternoon of graphic design, she told him. Maybe we'll even get that third box unpacked. Copper opened one eye, gave her a look that clearly said we both know that's not happening, then went back to his nap. Chapter 2. Old Florida Charm. At exactly 3 o'clock, Jake's pickup truck pulled into Rue's driveway with the kind of punctuality that suggested he'd been sitting around the corner checking his watch. Copper immediately abandoned his nap and trotted to the door, tail wagging, with the enthusiasm of a dog who'd correctly predicted an adventure was about to begin. Ready for your introduction to Pelican Cove High Society? Jake asked as Rue climbed into the passenger seat. Is that what we're calling it? Rue settled Copper on her lap, where he immediately pressed his nose to the window to monitor their route. I was thinking more along the lines of an afternoon of polite small talk with people who own boats I can't afford. Fair enough. Though you might be surprised, it's not all trust fund kids and retired CEOs. A lot of the members are just people who've been sailing here for decades. The drive to the yacht club took them along the harbor road, past weathered fishing docks and newer marinas that catered to the weekend boating crowd. Rue had driven this route dozens of times, but never really paid attention to the club itself. It had always been just another waterfront building in her peripheral vision. Now, actually looking at it with the intention of going inside, she had to admit Jake was right about the old Florida charm. The clubhouse looked like it had been built sometime in the 1940s, all weathered cedar shingles and wide porches designed to catch the sea breeze. Nothing pretentious about it, just a comfortable-looking building that had settled into its spot by the water like it belonged there. Not what you were expecting? Jake asked, noticing her expression. I guess I was picturing something more intimidating. White columns and valet parking, maybe. That's the Coral Gables Yacht Club. This is more about function than flash. The parking lot reinforced Jake's point. A mix of pickup trucks, well-used sedans, and the occasional luxury SUV, but nothing that screamed ridiculous wealth. People were moving back and forth between the clubhouse and the docks, carrying equipment and calling instructions to each other with the easy familiarity of a group that had been doing this for years. Copper perked up as they got out of the truck, his nose immediately going to work on all the new smells. Salt air, boat fuel, sunscreen, and something that might have been fresh fish from the docks. Dr. Torino! A woman in her 50s approached them, wearing the kind of practical sailing clothes that suggested she actually knew what she was doing on a boat. So glad you could make it. We always feel better having medical backup during race weekends. Wouldn't miss it, Captain Reyes. This is my friend Rue Castellano. She just moved to town. Rue, meet Captain Sophia Reyes, one of the best sailors in the club. Nice to meet you. Sophia's handshake was firm and her smile genuine. And who's this handsome fellow? Copper immediately turned on the charm, sitting politely and offering his paw for inspection. Sophia laughed and gave him the kind of thorough ear scratch that earned instant devotion. He's beautiful. What's his name? Copper. And he's apparently decided he likes you. Smart dog. Are you thinking about sailing? We're always looking for new crew members. I don't know anything about boats, Rue admitted. Best way to learn is by doing. We've got several members who'd be happy to teach you the basics. Sophia gestured toward the harbor, where a dozen sailboats were anchored in preparation for the weekend race. It's addictive once you get the hang of it. Sophia's being modest, Jake said. She's won more races here than anyone else in the club. Only because I've been doing this longer than most of these youngsters have been alive, Sophia said with a grin. Experience trumps fancy equipment every time. As if summoned by the mention of fancy equipment, a booming voice cut across the marina. Sophia? There you are. I need to talk to you about the race committee assignments. The man approaching them looked exactly like Rue's mental image of a yacht club commodore. Tall, silver-haired, and wearing the kind of expensive sailing clothes that had probably never been exposed to actual salt water. His stride suggested someone accustomed to having people step aside when he walked through a room. Commodore Webb, Sophia said, her tone noticeably cooler than it had been moments before. This is Dr. Torino, our medical volunteer for the weekend, and his friend Rue Castellano. Harrison Webb's attention focused on Jake with the kind of calculating assessment that suggested he was mentally cataloging useful connections. Dr. Torino, excellent. Always good to have medical coverage, though I'm sure we won't need it. Our members are experienced sailors. His gaze flicked to Rue with considerably less interest. Miss Castellano, are you new to sailing? New to everything, actually. I just moved here from Chicago. Chicago. Webb's tone suggested he'd just been told she was from Mars. Well, I'm sure you'll find sailing quite different from whatever activities you're used to. It requires a certain level of commitment and understanding of maritime traditions. I'll keep that in mind, Rue said, matching his condescending tone with her own dry delivery. Jake stepped slightly closer to her, not obviously protective, but definitely supportive. Rue's settling in well? She's already become part of the community. Webb's attention had already moved on to Sophia. About those race committee assignments, I need Marina to handle the finish line timing. She's the only one who really understands the system. Marina's already got registration and the social committee to manage, Sophia said. Maybe we could ask Tyler or one of the other junior members. Absolutely not. This is our biggest regatta of the season. I need someone reliable, not some kid who might get distracted. Webb's voice carried the kind of authority that suggested he was used to getting his way. Marina can handle it. That's what we pay her for. Copper, who had been patiently sitting beside Rue, suddenly lifted his head and looked toward the clubhouse with sharp attention. His ears were forward, and his body had that alert stillness that Rue had learned meant he'd noticed something important. What is it, boy? She asked quietly. Probably just picking up interesting scents from all the boats, Jake said, but he was watching Copper with the same attention he'd pay to any animal showing unusual behavior. Webb noticed their distraction and looked annoyed. I trust you can keep your dog under control during the regatta. We can't have animals disrupting the race preparations. Copper's very well behaved, Rue said, her tone suggesting that the same couldn't necessarily be said for all the mammals present. I'm sure. Webb turned back to Sophia. I want to review the course layout one more time before the weekend. Make sure Marina has all the marker positions correct. After Webb strode off toward the clubhouse, Sophia let out a small sigh. Sorry about that. Harrison means well, but he can be intense about club business. Seems like he puts a lot of pressure on this Marina person, Rue observed. Marina Martinez, our club secretary. She basically runs this place single-handedly. Registration, social events, communications, bookkeeping. Harrison tends to pile more responsibilities on her because she's so competent. That sounds like a recipe for burnout. It is. Marina's been looking pretty stressed lately, but she won't delegate. Says she can't afford to have anything go wrong on her watch. Jake was still watching Copper, who remained focused on something in the direction of the clubhouse. Has he been acting strangely today? Not until just now. He's usually pretty social, but something's got his attention. Well, let's go inside and see what's so interesting, Sophia suggested. I'll introduce you to Marina and some of the other members. Fair warning, though. If you stay more than 10 minutes, someone will try to recruit you for crew. The clubhouse interior lived up to the exterior's promise of comfortable functionality. Weathered wood floors, nautical charts on the walls, and furniture that looked like it had been chosen for durability rather than style. A bar dominated one corner, currently serving coffee and soft drinks to members who were taking a break from boat preparations. The woman behind the registration table looked like she was fighting a losing battle against stress and too much work. Marina Martinez appeared to be in her early 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and the kind of focused expression that suggested she was mentally juggling 17 different tasks at once. Marina, I want you to meet Dr. Torino and Rue Castellano, Sophia said, approaching the table. Marina looked up with a smile that didn't quite hide the exhaustion in her eyes. Dr. Torino, thank you so much for volunteering this weekend. I've got your contact information, and I'll make sure you have a radio so we can reach you if needed. She turned to Rue with the same professional warmth. Welcome to the club. Are you planning to sail in the regatta? Just observing for now, learning about the local sailing scene. Well, you picked a great weekend for it. We've got 23 boats registered, which is our biggest turnout this season. Marina's pride in the number was obvious, even through her fatigue. Copper had wandered closer to the registration table and was now sitting directly in front of it, staring at Marina with the kind of intense attention that made Rue wonder what he was picking up on. He's very focused, Marina said, noticing Copper's behavior. Beautiful dog. What's his name? Copper. And yes, he's being unusually attentive today. Marina reached across the table to offer Copper her hand for inspection. He sniffed politely but didn't break his alert posture. Smart dogs. Dachshunds. They notice things. Marina's voice had an odd note to it. My grandmother had one when I was growing up, always knew when something was off. Before Rue could ask what she meant by that, Webb's voice boomed across the room. Marina! Where are the weather reports for this weekend? I need to review the conditions before I finalize the course. Marina's shoulders tensed visibly. I printed them an hour ago, Commodore. They're in the blue folder on your desk. Which blue folder? There are 3 blue folders on my desk. The one labeled Weather Reports, Marina said with the kind of patience that suggested this was not their first such conversation. Webb disappeared into what was presumably his office, and Marina rubbed her temples like she was fighting a headache. Long day? Jake asked sympathetically. Long week. Long month, actually. Marina attempted another smile. But it'll all be worth it when we have a successful regatta. The club really needs this to go well. Financial pressure? Rue asked, her graphic designer's experience with struggling businesses making her sensitive to that particular kind of stress. Marina's expression became guarded. Just the usual challenges of running a nonprofit organization. We're fine. But the way she said it made Rue think they probably weren't fine at all. Copper suddenly stood up and walked deliberately toward the hallway that led to the club offices. He paused at the entrance and looked back at Rue, with the expression that meant, come see what I've found. I should probably follow him before he gets into trouble, Rue said. Oh, he won't cause any problems, Marina said quickly. The offices are pretty secure, just don't let him into the Commodore's office. Harrison's particular about his workspace. Jake fell into step beside Rue as they headed toward the hallway. What do you think he's after? With Copper? Could be anything from an interesting smell to a drop sandwich. But even as she said it, Rue noticed that Marina had turned back to her paperwork, with the kind of forced concentration that suggested she was avoiding watching them leave. Webb's voice echoed from somewhere down the hall. Marina, these weather reports are from yesterday. I need current conditions. Coming, Commodore, Marina called back, but she made no move to get up from her chair. Chapter 3. Regatta Day. Saturday morning brought perfect sailing weather, clear skies, steady breeze, and the kind of temperatures that made Rue grateful she'd left Chicago behind. She'd agreed to help Jake with medical coverage, which mostly meant sitting in a golf cart with a first aid kit while pretending to understand what was happening on the water. Jake nodded toward a sleek racing yacht that looked like it cost more than most people's houses. That's Webb's new boat. Windfall bought it 3 months ago. Must be nice to have yacht money. That's what everyone's saying, especially since the club's been hitting members with new fees left and right. Jake adjusted his radio and checked his medical supplies. Boat slip fees, increased dues, dock repair assessments. People aren't happy. Copper had settled into the passenger seat and was watching the marina bustle with obvious interest. Boats were being prepared, crews were gathering, and the dock buzzed with pre-race activity. Dr. Torino! Marina appeared beside their cart, looking even more frazzled than she had 2 days ago. She clutched a clipboard and a radio, and her hair was escaping from her ponytail in the humid morning air. Thank goodness you're here. I've got your radio frequency, and you'll be stationed near the finish line dock in case anyone needs medical attention. Sounds good? How's everything going? Oh, the usual regatta madness. Equipment problems, crew arguments, and Harrison asking for weather updates every 5 minutes. Marina's smile looked forced, but everyone should be ready for the 11 o'clock start. Need any help? Rue asked. Marina looked tempted for about half a second, then shook her head. Thanks, but I've got everything under control. Just need to get through the next few hours without any major disasters. She hurried off towards some sailors who were having what looked like a heated discussion. Rue watched her go, noting how Marina's shoulders stayed tense even when she smiled. She's wound pretty tight, Jake observed. Can't blame her. Webb seems like the type who'd blame his secretary if it rained during his regatta. They positioned their cart near the finish line, where they had a good view of the starting area and the harbor. Other spectators were gathering on the clubhouse deck and along the waterfront. Family members, friends, and sailing enthusiasts who could probably talk about wind patterns all day. Copper immediately hopped out of the cart and began investigating the dock area with his usual thoroughness. He paused at several spots, nose working overtime, but nothing seemed to hold his attention for long. "Looking for clues, Detective?" Rue asked. "Probably just interested in all the different boat smells," Jake said. "Lots of new scents around here today." At 10:30, the boats began moving toward the starting line, 23 sailboats trying to get into position without running into each other. Webb's windfall was easy to spot, both because of its size and because Webb was shouting orders loud enough to be heard from shore. "He's got that guy Pete Flanagan working his bow," Jake said. "Good sailor, but he's been having a rough time lately." "Rough time how?" "Lost his fishing charter business last year. Been struggling to find work. Webb hiring him was decent, actually." Rue was about to respond when Copper suddenly froze, his attention focused on something near the yacht club office building. His body went completely still in that way that meant he'd found something important. "Jake," she said quietly. Jake followed her gaze to where Copper was staring. "What's he looking at?" "I don't know, but he's doing that thing again." Rue got out of the cart and walked over to Copper, who was now sitting perfectly still and staring at a specific window on the side of the clubhouse. "What is it, boy?" Copper looked at her, then back at the window, then made a small whining sound that she'd never heard from him before. "That's Webb's office window," Jake said, joining them. "Is he in there?" "No, he's on his boat getting ready for the race." Jake shaded his eyes and looked up at the window. "Can't see anything from here." The starting horn blew, cutting off their conversation. 23 boats crossed the starting line and headed toward the first turn. Webb's windfall got off to a clean start and quickly moved to the front of the pack. "Beautiful day for it," Jake said, settling back to watch the race. Rue was trying to focus on the sailing, but Copper remained fixated on Webb's office window. Every few minutes, he'd look at her with an expression that clearly said, "You're not paying attention to the important thing." "This is bothering him," she said finally. "Maybe we should take a look after the race. Right now, we need to stay put in case there are any medical emergencies on the water." The race went smoothly, with Webb's windfall staying near the front as the boats worked their way around the course. It was during the final leg, when the boats were heading back toward the finish line, that Copper's behavior changed completely. He stood up alert and agitated and began pacing in a small circle. Then he looked directly at Rue and gave a single, sharp bark, something he rarely did unless it was important. "Okay, that's definitely not normal," Jake said. The first boats were crossing the finish line, with Windfall taking second place behind Sophia Reyes's smaller but expertly sailed boat. Cheers went up from the spectators as the finishers were recorded and the rest of the fleet worked their way home. But Copper wasn't interested in the race results. He was pulling toward the clubhouse with increasing urgency, clearly wanting to investigate whatever had captured his attention. "The race is basically over," Jake said, watching the last few boats approach the finish. "Why don't we go see what's got him so worked up?" They walked toward the clubhouse, Copper leading the way with purposeful determination. A few other people were heading in the same direction, race participants looking for cold drinks and post-race socializing. Marina was standing near the clubhouse entrance with her clipboard, looking relieved that everything had gone smoothly. "Great regatta," Jake called to her. "Everything went perfectly." "Thanks. I'm so relieved." Harrison should be pleased with how everything turned out. Marina glanced around. "Speaking of Harrison, have you seen him?" "He should have finished by now, but I don't see Windfall at the dock." Rue looked out at the harbor, where most of the boats were either tied up at the dock or anchored nearby. Marina was right. Webb's distinctive boat was nowhere to be seen. "Maybe he's celebrating with his crew somewhere," she suggested. "Maybe, but Harrison never misses the post-race social hour." "He likes to hold court and talk about the race." Marina looked genuinely puzzled. It's not like him to just disappear. Copper had continued toward the office building and was now sitting directly underneath Webb's window, looking up expectantly. "I think we need to check that office," Rue said quietly to Jake. Before he could respond, one of the race participants approached Marina with a concerned expression. Marina, you might want to call the harbor patrol. I just saw Windfall anchored in the back bay, but there's nobody on deck and the boat looks abandoned. Chapter 4. Dead in the water. Abandoned? Marina's voice went up an octave. What do you mean abandoned? The sailor, Rue thought his name was Tyler, shifted uncomfortably. I mean, there's nobody on deck, the sails are still up, and she's just sitting there anchored in the shallows. Looks like whoever was sailing her just left. Jake was already reaching for his radio. We should check it out. Medical emergency, maybe. I'll call the harbor patrol, Marina said, pulling out her phone. They can... Copper's sharp bark cut her off. He was standing under Webb's office window, tail rigid, staring up at them with an urgency that made Rue's stomach clench. Something's wrong, she said. Copper doesn't act like this unless... Another bark, more insistent this time. Marina, do you have keys to the office? Jake asked. Well, yes, but Harrison doesn't like people going into his... Harrison's missing and his boat's abandoned, Rue interrupted. I think we're past worrying about his privacy preferences. Marina hesitated, then pulled a keyring from her pocket. You're right. This way. The clubhouse felt different with most people still outside celebrating the regatta results. Their footsteps echoed on the old wooden floors as Marina led them down the hallway toward Webb's corner office. Copper trotted ahead, occasionally looking back to make sure they were following. Harrison was so excited about this race, Marina said more to herself than to them. He's been planning his strategy for weeks. He wouldn't just abandon his boat. Jake's radio crackled to life. Dr. Torino, this is Harbor Patrol. We're heading out to check on Windfall now. Stand by. Marina fumbled with the keys at Webb's office door. I hope he's okay. I know Harrison can be difficult, but he's not. I mean, he wouldn't just... The door swung open to reveal a perfectly ordinary office. Desk, computer, charts on the walls, sailing trophies on shelves. Everything looked normal except for the window, which was wide open despite the air conditioning running. Copper immediately went to the window and put his front paws on the sill, looking down toward the water. Why would Harrison leave his window open? Marina asked. He's always complaining about wasting electricity. Rue joined Copper at the window and looked down. The office was on the second floor, with a clear view of the harbor and the area where spectators had been watching the race. Below the window, about 15 feet down, was a narrow strip of landscaping between the building and the dock. Jake, she said quietly, you need to see this. He appeared beside her and looked where she was pointing. In the mulch below the window, something dark was partially hidden by a large palm frond. Is that... Marina started. Stay here, Jake said firmly. Both of you, and keep everyone else away from this area. He was already heading for the door. Rue heard his footsteps on the stairs, then the sound of the building's side exit opening. Marina wrapped her arms around herself. This can't be happening. Not today. Everything was going so perfectly. Copper whined softly and looked at Rue with an expression that managed to convey both sympathy and I told you something was wrong. You did good, buddy, she said, scratching behind his ears. You tried to tell us. Jake's voice drifted up from below the window, though she couldn't make out the words. A moment later, his radio crackled. Harbor Patrol, this is Dr. Torino. Cancel the search for Windfall. I need you to respond to the yacht club immediately. We have a body. Marina's legs seemed to give out. She sat down heavily in Webb's desk chair, staring at the radio in Jake's voice. A body, she repeated. Harrison's dead? The radio crackled again. Dr. Torino, this is Officer Castillo. Are you certain the victim is deceased? I'm certain. Blunt force trauma to the head. He's been dead for several hours. Rue found herself studying the office with new eyes. The open window, the perfectly organized desk, the computer that was still on, screensaver scrolling through photos of sailboats. Marina, she said carefully, when did you last see Harrison today? This morning, around 9:30 maybe. He came in to check on something before the race. Said he wanted to review the course one more time. Marina's voice was getting higher with each word. He seemed fine. Excited about the race, he was looking forward to beating Sophia again. Was he alone? I think so. I was busy with registration, so I wasn't really paying attention. Jake's footsteps on the stairs interrupted them. He appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. The police are on their way. Harbor Patrol's securing the scene and EMT's en route, even though... He shook his head. We need to clear everyone away from the building. This is officially a crime scene. Crime scene? Marina stood up so fast, she knocked over her clipboard. Papers scattered across the floor. You think someone murdered Harrison? I think someone hit him in the head hard enough to kill him, Jake said. Whether that was intentional or not is for the police to figure out. Copper had moved away from the window and was now sniffing around Webb's desk with focused attention. He paused at the wastebasket, then moved to a spot near the door. What's he doing? Marina asked. Following scent trails, probably, Rue said, trying to figure out who was in here and when. Sirens were getting closer. Through the open window, Rue could see people on the dock, pointing toward the building and talking in clusters. Word was spreading fast. The race, Marina said suddenly. People are going to want to know what happened. There's supposed to be an awards ceremony. I think the awards ceremony is the least of our problems right now, Jake said gently. Officer Diana Castillo appeared in the doorway, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. Dr. Torino? I need everyone except the person who found the body to step outside, please. Actually, it was my dog who found him, Rue said. He's been acting strange all morning, trying to get our attention. Castillo looked at Copper, who was now sitting politely by the desk. Your dog found a body? He led us to the window. Harrison Webb's body is down in the landscaping below. And you are? Ruby Castellano. I was helping with medical coverage for the regatta. Right. Castillo pulled out a notebook. I'll need statements from all of you, but first I need to secure the scene. Ms. Martinez, is it? I'll need you to help me identify what belongs in this office and what doesn't. Marina nodded, then looked around the office like she was seeing it for the first time. Everything looks normal, except the window. Harrison never opens the window. Castillo made a note. We'll need to check that. In the meantime, I need everyone to think about what they saw and heard this morning. Any arguments, any unusual behavior, anyone who seemed upset or angry. The whole club's been tense lately, Marina said. Money problems, complaints about fees. Harrison's been, difficult to work with. Difficult how? Demanding. Critical. He's been putting a lot of pressure on people to make this regatta perfect. Some members have been vocal about their displeasure. Through the window, Rue could see more police cars arriving. The celebration atmosphere around the dock was rapidly turning into something else as people realized what was happening. Ms. Castellano, Officer Castillo said, I'll need you and your dog to stay available for questions. And Dr. Torino, thank you for calling this in promptly. Of course. Should I? Castillo's radio interrupted him. Officer Castillo, we've got the scene secured and the ME's en route. Also, Harbor Patrol found something interesting on the victim's boat. Chapter 5. Questions and Doubts. Harbor Patrol found something on Webb's boat, Officer Castillo said into her radio. What kind of something? The response crackled back. His expensive watch is missing, but we found it hidden under the dock. And his boat shoes are too clean, no salt stains like they've been wiped down. Rue glanced at Jake. In her limited experience with dead bodies, people didn't usually clean their shoes after falling out of windows. Copy that, Castillo said. Bag everything and bring it in. Marina was still sitting in Webb's chair staring at the computer screen. This doesn't make sense. Harrison was so careful about everything. He wouldn't just fall out a window. People don't usually fall out of second-story windows, Jake said. Not without help. Castillo looked up from her notes. Ms. Martinez, I need you to walk me through Harrison's schedule today. Everything you remember. He got here around 9:30, came into the office, said he wanted to check the weather one more time before the race. I was busy with registration, so I didn't really pay attention. Marina's voice was getting steadier, like talking about routine things was helping her focus. He seemed excited about the race. Said something about finally beating Sophia. Sophia Reyes? She wins most of our races. Harrison didn't like losing to anyone, but especially not to Sophia. Copper had wandered over to the window and was sniffing along the sill with renewed interest. He paused at one spot and gave a small woof. What's he found now? Castillo asked. Rue joined Copper at the window. There were scuff marks on the sill, like someone had gripped it hard. Looks like someone might have climbed out this way. Or been pushed, Jake said quietly. Marina made a small sound. You really think someone murdered Harrison? I think someone hit him hard enough to kill him, Castillo said. Whether they meant to or not is what we need to figure out. The radio crackled again. Officer Castillo, we've got the ME here and several witnesses wanting to give statements. How do you want to handle this? Set up in the main room. I'll be down in a few minutes. Castillo turned back to them. Ms. Martinez, I'll need a list of everyone who had access to this building today. Dr. Torino, Miss Castellano, you're free to go for now, but don't leave town. We weren't planning to, Rue said. But what about the yacht club? Are you shutting it down? Just the office area for now. The rest of the building is fine, but I keep people away from the crime scene. As they headed back downstairs, Rue could hear the buzz of conversation from the main room. Word had definitely spread, and from the sound of it, people had opinions. Always said he was too aggressive. Money problems for months. Saw him arguing with someone last week. Jake caught her arm gently. You okay? This has been a lot for your first yacht club visit. I'm fine. Just thinking. She looked back toward the stairs. Something about this feels off. Off how? If someone wanted to kill Webb, why do it here? During the regatta, with people everywhere? It seems like the worst possible time and place. Maybe it wasn't planned. Maybe something happened and it got out of hand. They reached the main room where Officer Castillo was setting up to take statements. Marina was directing people away from the office area, and several club members were clustered around her asking questions. Is it true Harrison's dead? An older woman asked. Was it an accident? A man in sailing clothes wanted to know. Are we safe here? Someone else called out. Marina looked overwhelmed. Please, everyone, just let the police do their job. Copper had been quiet during the walk downstairs, but now he was alert again, his attention focused on the crowd of people. His ears were forward, and he had that expression that meant he was processing a lot of information. What do you think, Detective? Rue asked him quietly. Excuse me, are you the one with the dog that found the body? Rue turned to see Sophia Reyes approaching them. The sailing captain looked shaken but determined. Yes, this is Copper. He's the one who led us to the office. Smart dog. Sophia glanced around the room, then lowered her voice. Can I talk to you privately? There's something about Harrison you should know. Jake moved closer. What kind of something? Financial something. Harrison's been acting strange about club money lately. Really strange. Strange how? Sophia looked around again, making sure no one was listening. 3 weeks ago, I needed to check our account balance for a vendor payment. Harrison got defensive, said the books were his responsibility and no one else needed to see them. But I've been treasurer before. That's not how we usually handle things. Did you push the issue? I tried, but Harrison shut me down. Said if I didn't trust him to manage the club's finances, maybe I should consider resigning from the board. Rue felt something click into place. The boat. His expensive new boat. Where did he get the money for that? That's what I've been wondering. Harrison's a retired insurance adjuster. Good pension, but not yacht money. Especially not custom racing yacht money. Jake was quiet for a moment. How much access does the Commodore have to club funds? Total access. He signs all the checks, handles all the deposits. Marina does the bookkeeping, but Harrison reviews everything. And Marina wouldn't know if money was missing? Not if Harrison was covering it up. She trusts him completely. Trusted, Sophia corrected herself. Copper suddenly stood up and walked toward the registration table where Marina had been working earlier. He sat down and looked back at them expectantly. Now what? Rue said. They followed Copper to the table, where papers were still scattered from when Marina had knocked over her clipboard. Copper sniffed at the papers, then looked up at a small safe tucked under the table. That's where we keep registration fees and other cash, Sophia said. Harrison has the combination? Had, Jake corrected. Right. Had. Officer Castillo's voice carried across the room. I need to speak with anyone who had a conversation with Harrison Webb this morning. Please form a line here. The crowd began organizing itself, but Rue noticed several people hanging back, looking uncomfortable. Jake, she said quietly, look at who's not getting in line. He followed her gaze. 3 people were edging toward the exit. A woman in her 60s, a younger man in sailing gear, and someone Rue didn't recognize. Should we tell Officer Castellano? Probably. But maybe we should see where they're going first. Sophia was still standing beside them. The woman is Vivian Webb, Harrison's wife. The guy in the sailing gear is Pete Flanagan. He was crew on Harrison's boat today. And the third person? I don't know. Never seen him before. Copper was still focused on the safe under the registration table. He gave a small whine and pawed at it gently. You think there's something in there? Rue asked him. Copper's tail wagged once, which she'd learned was his way of saying yes. Sophia, who besides Harrison knows the combination to that safe? Just Marina, and maybe the treasurer, but that position's been vacant since March. Vacant since March? The previous treasurer quit, said he couldn't work with Webb anymore. Something about discrepancies in the budget. Jake and Rue exchanged glances. I think, Rue said, we need to have a longer conversation with Marina. Chapter 6. Hidden Depths. The conversation with Marina would have to wait. By the time they tracked her down, she was knee-deep in damage control, fielding phone calls from members who'd heard about Webb's death and wanted to know if the club was safe, if their regatta fees were secure, if they should cancel their slip rentals. Yes, Mrs. Patterson, the club is still operating normally, Marina was saying into her phone while simultaneously trying to organize scattered paperwork. No, we don't know anything about your membership dues. Yes, I'll call you back. She hung up and immediately picked up another ringing phone. Pelican Cove Yacht Club, this is Marina. Jake caught Rue's eye and nodded toward the exit. They needed information, but Marina clearly wasn't available to provide it. Outside, the parking lot was still buzzing with post-regatta activity, though the mood had shifted from celebration to something more subdued. Small groups of people stood around talking in low voices, and Rue noticed several members loading their cars like they were planning to leave quickly. So what now? She asked. Now we see what we can find out about the club's finances, Jake said. I've got a friend at the bank who might be able to help. Won't that information be confidential? Probably. But Tom Brennan's been handling the club's business banking for years. If there's something obviously wrong, he might be willing to share general concerns. Copper had been quiet during their conversation with Sophia, but now he was alert again, watching the parking lot with interest. His attention seemed focused on a woman sitting in a car near the exit, engine running but not leaving. Jake, look. They followed Copper's gaze to a silver sedan where someone was hunched over the steering wheel. Even from a distance, Rue could see the woman's shoulders shaking. That's Vivian Webb, Jake said, Harrison's wife. Should we talk to her? Probably not our place. But the decision was made for them when Vivian got out of her car and walked toward them. She was maybe 60, well-dressed in the way that suggested money but not flashiness. Her eyes were red from crying, but she composed herself enough to approach strangers. You're the ones who found Harrison, she said. It wasn't a question. My dog found him, Rue said. I'm sorry for your loss. Vivian nodded absently. Everyone keeps saying that. Sorry for your loss. Like Harrison was hit by lightning or something random. She looked directly at Rue. But it wasn't random, was it? I don't know. The police are investigating. The police? Vivian's laugh had no humor in it. They'll look at the obvious things. Who had access, who was angry with Harrison, who might have wanted him dead. They won't look at the real reasons. Jake stepped closer. What real reasons? Vivian glanced around the parking lot, then back at them. Can we talk somewhere private? Not here. 20 minutes later, they were sitting in a back booth at Stella's coffee shop, which was nearly empty in the late afternoon lull between lunch and dinner. Vivian wrapped her hands around a cup of tea she wasn't drinking while Copper lay quietly at Rue's feet. Harrison wasn't a bad man, Vivian said. Difficult, yes. Demanding, absolutely. But not bad. That's what makes this so terrible. What do you mean? Rue asked. He was trying to fix things. The money problems at the club. He'd been putting his own money in to cover shortfalls, hoping things would turn around. Vivian's voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. That's where the boat money came from. Not club funds, his retirement account. Jake leaned forward. He bought the boat with his own retirement money? His inheritance from his mother. She died last year and left him some money. Harrison was so excited about finally being able to afford a competitive boat. Vivian wiped her eyes. He thought if he could win some races, maybe attract new members, the club could get back on its feet financially. But Sophia said the club's been charging new fees, Rue said, because they're desperate. The renovation fund is almost empty, membership is down, and the insurance costs keep going up. Harrison's been trying to keep things together, but it's been getting worse every month. Copper lifted his head and looked toward the coffee shop entrance. A moment later, the bell chimed and Marina walked in, looking frazzled and exhausted. "Vivian? I saw your car outside." Marina approached their table hesitantly. "How are you holding up?" "About as well as you'd expect." Vivian gestured to the empty chair. "Sit. We were just talking about the club's finances." Marina's expression tightened. "What about them?" "I was telling them how Harrison's been using his own money to keep things afloat." "Vivian, maybe we shouldn't." "Shouldn't what?" "Tell the truth." "Harrison's dead, Marina, murdered." "I think the truth is exactly what we should be telling." Marina sat down reluctantly. "The club's financial situation isn't really anyone else's business." "It is if it got Harrison killed," Vivian said. "You think someone killed him over money?" Jake asked. "I think someone killed him because they didn't understand what he was trying to do," Vivian said, "or because they were afraid he'd find out what they were doing." Marina went very still. "What do you mean?" "You tell me, Marina. You're the one who handles the books." The tension between the two women was suddenly thick enough to cut. Rue found herself leaning forward, trying to read the subtext of their conversation. "I handle the bookkeeping," Marina said carefully. "Harrison reviews everything and makes all the final decisions." "Made," Vivian corrected. "Past tense." "Right, made." "So you'd know if money was missing?" "Of course I'd know. I reconcile the accounts every month." "And?" Marina was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "And there have been some discrepancies?" "What kind of discrepancies?" Jake asked. "Small ones at first. A few $100s here and there that I couldn't account for. I mentioned it to Harrison, but he said not to worry about it, that he'd figure it out." "When did this start?" "Maybe 6 months ago. The amounts were so small I thought maybe I was making mistakes in the reconciliation." "But they got bigger?" Rue guessed. Marina nodded. "Last month, almost $3,000 was missing from the renovation account. When I showed Harrison the bank statements, he got angry, said I was incompetent, that the money was there, and I just couldn't read a balance sheet properly." "But you could read it properly?" "I've been doing bookkeeping for 15 years. I know how to read a bank statement." Vivian was staring at Marina with an expression Rue couldn't quite read. "Why didn't you tell me any of this?" "Harrison said not to discuss club business with members, even you. Even his wife." "Especially his wife, actually. He said you worried too much about money as it was." Vivian's laugh was bitter. "He was protecting me from the truth while he was emptying his retirement account to cover whatever was happening." Copper suddenly stood up and walked to the window, alert and focused. Outside, a police car was pulling into the parking lot. "That's Castillo," Jake said. "She probably wants to talk to Vivian." "I should go," Marina said, starting to stand. "Marina, wait." Vivian grabbed her arm. "The missing money. Do you have any idea where it went?" Marina hesitated. "I have suspicions, but no proof." "What kind of suspicions?" "The kind that could get someone arrested if I'm wrong." Through the window, they could see Officer Castillo getting out of her car and looking around the parking lot. "She's looking for us," Rue said. "Or for me," Vivian said. "Harrison's widow. I'm probably high on her list of people to interview." Marina was still standing, but she hadn't left. "Vivian, there's something else you should know about Harrison's finances." "What?" "The boat. Windfall. It's not paid for. Harrison's been making payments, but he still owes almost $60,000 on it." The color drained from Vivian's face. "60,000? But he said—" "He said a lot of things that weren't true. About the club, about the money, about how well everything was going." Castillo had spotted them through the window and was heading toward the coffee shop entrance. "We need to continue this conversation later," Jake said, "preferably with more specifics about those suspicions." Marina nodded. "Tonight, after I get the phones to stop ringing and figure out how to keep the club running without Harrison." The bell above the door chimed as Castillo entered. She looked around the nearly empty shop and headed straight for their table. Chapter 7. Red Herrings. Officer Castillo's arrival at the coffee shop ended their conversation before Marina could elaborate on her suspicions. But it didn't take long for other people to start talking. Pete Flanagan was the first to seek them out, catching up with Rue and Jake in the yacht club parking lot the next morning as they returned Copper's leash to her car. "Heard you folks were asking questions about Harrison's finances," Pete said without preamble. He was a big man, maybe 50, with the weathered skin and calloused hands of someone who'd spent his life working on boats. "Figured you should know he wasn't the only one having money problems." "What do you mean?" Jake asked. Pete glanced around the parking lot, then lowered his voice. "Lost my charter business last year. Bank foreclosed, took everything. Harrison knew that when he hired me for crew." "That was good of him," Rue said. "Was it? Or was he just making sure I'd keep my mouth shut about what I saw?" Copper, who had been sniffing around the base of a palm tree, suddenly looked up at Pete with sharp attention. Not the friendly interest he usually showed new people, but something more alert. "What kind of things did you see?" Jake asked. Harrison meeting with people he shouldn't have been meeting with, taking phone calls he didn't want anyone to overhear, acting nervous when certain members came around asking questions. "What kind of people?" "Contractors, mostly. The ones bidding on the dock renovation project." Harrison was supposed to be getting quotes from 3 different companies, but he kept meeting with just one guy. Same guy whose bid came in lowest, even though his work on other projects around town has been questionable? Rue felt her interest sharpen. Questionable how? Shoddy work, cost overruns, projects that never quite get finished on schedule. But somehow Tony Marcelli keeps getting contracts. "You think Webb was taking kickbacks?" "I think Harrison was desperate to keep this place afloat, and maybe he wasn't being too careful about how he did it." Pete's voice carried a note of bitterness. He didn't care who got hurt as long as the yacht club survived. "Who got hurt?" "Me, for starters. He hired me because he knew I needed the work, but he also knew I couldn't afford to ask uncomfortable questions. Anyone who depended on him for anything, he had leverage." Jake was quiet for a moment. "Pete, where were you yesterday morning? During the race?" Pete's expression darkened. "You asking because you think I killed him?" "I'm asking because someone did." "I was on his boat until about 10:30. We had some rigging issues that took longer to fix than expected. After that, I went to Murphy's for a beer and stayed there until I heard the sirens." "Murphy's opens at 10 a.m.? For regulars, yeah. Especially regulars who just lost a day's pay because their boss got himself murdered." After Pete left, Rue found herself watching Copper, who was still alert and focused in the direction Pete had gone. "What do you think, detective?" she asked him. "Well, is Pete telling the truth?" Copper's tail wagged once, which she'd learned usually meant yes, but he was still watching the spot where Pete had disappeared. "Something's bothering him about Pete," Jake observed. "Or something Pete said." They were discussing whether to track down this Tony Marcelli when Vivian Webb appeared again, this time accompanied by a younger woman who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. "This is Tyler Nash," Vivian said. "He's one of the sailing instructors here. Tyler, these are the people I told you about." Tyler looked like he was in his early 20s, with the kind of lean build that came from spending time on sailboats. He also looked nervous as hell. "Mrs. Webb thinks I should talk to you," Tyler said reluctantly. "About what?" "About Harrison threatening to fire me." Rue exchanged glances with Jake. "When was this?" "Last week. He called me into his office and said the club was making cutbacks, that my position might be eliminated." "Did he say why?" Tyler's face flushed. "He said I was spending too much time with certain members and not enough time actually teaching sailing." "Certain members?" Tyler glanced at Vivian, who nodded encouragingly. "Mrs. Webb and we've become friends. Harrison didn't approve?" "Friends?" Jake asked carefully. "We've been having coffee together. Talking. She's been helping me figure out what to do with my life, whether I want to keep teaching sailing or try to get into yacht design." Tyler's voice was defensive. "It's not what Harrison thought it was." Vivian put a hand on Tyler's arm. "Harrison was jealous. He thought I was interested in Tyler romantically, which is ridiculous." "Is it?" Rue asked, not unkindly. "Tyler's the same age as my son." "Yes, it's ridiculous." Vivian's tone was firm, but Harrison had convinced himself otherwise, and he was taking it out on Tyler professionally. Tyler nodded. "He told me if he saw me having inappropriate conversations with his wife again, he'd make sure I never worked at another yacht club in Florida." "Where were you yesterday morning?" Jake asked. "Teaching a beginner's class until 11. Then I went home. I live about 10 minutes from here, alone." "Anyone see you at home?" "My landlord, maybe. He was working on the landscaping when I got there." After Tyler and Vivian left, Rue realized she was starting to feel overwhelmed by the number of people who'd had problems with Webb. "This is getting complicated," she said. "Most murders are," Jake replied. "People don't usually kill someone unless there's a good reason. Or unless they think there's a good reason." Copper had been investigating the yacht club's outdoor seating area, and now came trotting back with something in his mouth. "What have you got there, boy?" Copper dropped a crumpled piece of paper at her feet and sat down expectantly. Rue picked it up and smoothed it out. "It's a receipt," she said, "from Murphy's pub." Yesterday's date, 10:45 a.m. Jake looked at the receipt. Pete Flanagan bought 3 beers between 10:45 and noon. Either he was really thirsty or he was buying for other people. Or he wasn't drinking alone, which means his alibi might not be as solid as he made it sound. They were still examining the receipt when Marina appeared, looking like she hadn't slept much. "I've been looking for you," she said. "I want to show you something." She led them back into the yacht club and to the registration area, where the small safe was tucked under the table. "I opened it this morning," Marina said. "Harrison always kept the weekly registration fees in here until I could get to the bank. And it's empty. There should be almost $2,000 from this weekend's regatta fees." Rue stared at the open safe. "When did you last see the money?" "Friday afternoon. I put the pre-registration fees in there myself." "Who else knows the combination?" "Just Harrison and me, and—" Marina hesitated. "And who?" "Tyler Nash. Harrison had me give him the combination last month when I was sick and couldn't handle the regatta registration. He was filling in for me." Jake was quiet for a moment. "Marina, you said yesterday that you had suspicions about who was taking club money. Were you thinking about Tyler?" "I don't know. Maybe. He's been acting strange lately, and he has access to a lot of the club's finances when he helps with registration." Marina wrung her hands. "But I can't believe Tyler would steal from us. He's such a nice kid." "Nice kids can still steal money if they're desperate enough," Rue said. "Or if they're being blackmailed," Jake added. Copper suddenly stood up and walked purposefully toward the club's main entrance. Through the windows, they could see a police car pulling up. "That's Castillo again," Marina said. "I called her about the missing money." As they watched, Castillo got out of her car along with another officer. She looked grim, and she was carrying what appeared to be an evidence bag. "Marina Martinez?" Castillo called as she entered the clubhouse. "I need to speak with you. We found something in Tyler Nash's apartment that belongs to the yacht club." Chapter 8. Behind closed doors. The evidence bag Castillo carried contained a yacht club checkbook and deposit slips, along with what looked like cash bundled in rubber bands. Tyler Nash was officially their prime suspect, and Marina looked like she was going to be sick. "I can't believe Tyler would steal from us," Marina said for the 3rd time, as they watched the police car drive away with her to give a formal statement about the missing money. "Believe it," Jake said grimly. $2,000 in cash found in his apartment, plus a checkbook that shouldn't have been there. But something was bothering Rue about the whole situation. Tyler had seemed genuinely nervous about losing his job, not like someone who'd been systematically stealing money. And Copper had been more interested in Pete Flanagan than in Tyler. "Jake," she said slowly, "what if we're looking at this wrong?" "Wrong how?" "What if Tyler didn't steal the money? What if someone wanted it to look like he did? You think he's being framed?" "I think someone who knew Tyler had access to the safe might have decided to make him the fall guy." They were standing in the yacht club parking lot, debating whether to go home and let the police handle things, when Vivian Webb approached them again. This time she looked determined rather than grief-stricken. "I want to search my husband's office," she said without preamble. "Vivian, the police already." "The police looked for evidence that someone broke in or fought with him. They didn't look for evidence of what he was really doing." Vivian's voice was steady. "I need to know the truth about the money, about the club, about everything he was hiding from me." "Are you sure you want to know?" Rue asked gently. "No, but I need to know anyway." Vivian had keys to the office and the authority as Webb's widow to authorize their search. The police tape had been removed from the door, though the window was still boarded up where Webb's body had been found. Webb's office looked different in the afternoon light. What had seemed like simple organization yesterday now felt more deliberate, like everything had been carefully arranged to present a specific image. "What are we looking for?" Jake asked. "Financial records that Marina doesn't know about," Vivian said. "Meeting notes with contractors. Anything that explains where the money went." Copper immediately went to Webb's desk and sat down in front of it, tail wagging once. "He wants us to look there first," Rue said. The desk drawers were locked, but Vivian had keys for those too. The first drawer contained the usual office supplies, but the second one held file folders labeled with what appeared to be project names. "Dock Renovation Phase 1, Rue read. "Dock Renovation Phase 2. Clubhouse Repairs." These must be the improvement projects. Each folder contained contractor bids, but as they spread the papers out on Webb's desk, a pattern emerged that made Rue's stomach clench. "Look at this," she said. "Every project has 3 bids, just like Sophia said, but the winning bid is always from Marcelli Construction, and the amounts are significant." Jake studied the numbers. 30,000 for dock repairs that should cost maybe 15. 25,000 for clubhouse painting that any decent contractor would do for 10. "And look at the dates," Vivian added. "These projects have been going on for 8 months, but I drive by here almost every day, and I've never seen major construction work happening." Copper had moved to a filing cabinet and was sniffing around the base of it with focused attention. "What's he found now?" Rue asked. The filing cabinet was also locked, but Vivian's keyring included what looked like a master key for all the office furniture. Inside, they found something that made the contractor bids look like small change. "Bank statements," Jake said, pulling out a thick folder, "but not for the yacht club's main accounts." The statements were for an account at a different bank, one that none of them recognized. The account was in Webb's name, and the deposits over the past 8 months totaled almost $70,000. "Where did this money come from?" Vivian whispered. Rue was studying the deposit dates. "They match up with the contractor payments. Look, here's a deposit for $15,000 on the same day the club paid Marcelli Construction $30,000 for dock work." So Webb was inflating the contractor bills and pocketing the difference? "That's what it looks like." Vivian sat down heavily in her husband's chair. $70,000. He stole $70,000 from the club and let me think he was using his inheritance to help keep it afloat. "Vivian," Jake said gently, "did you know about this bank account?" "I had no idea. We kept our finances separate. I managed the household accounts. He handled his business affairs. I trusted him." Copper had wandered over to the boarded-up window and was sniffing along the baseboard. He paused at one spot and gave a small whine. "There's something else here," Rue said, joining him. Behind Webb's desk, partially hidden by the chair, was a small safe built into the wall. It was the kind of thing you might miss if you weren't looking for it, especially with crime scene investigators focused on the window and the area where Webb's body had been found. "Do you have the combination?" Jake asked. "I don't even know what could be in there," Vivian said. "More money? More lies? Only one way to find out." Vivian tried several combinations. Webb's birthday, their anniversary, the yacht club's founding date. Nothing worked. "Wait," Rue said. "Try the boat." "Windfall's registration number." That didn't work either, but when Vivian tried the boat's purchase date, the safe clicked open. Inside were more bank statements, these from a third account, along with contracts and correspondence that painted an even darker picture of Webb's activities. "My God," Vivian breathed. He wasn't just inflating contractor bills. He was creating fake invoices for work that was never done. The correspondence was with Tony Marcelli, and it laid out a systematic scheme to defraud the yacht club. Fake invoices, kickbacks, and even a plan to blame Marina if anyone started asking too many questions. "Look at this," Jake said, holding up a letter. Marcelli was getting nervous about the scheme. He wanted to stop, but Webb was pressuring him to continue. Because Webb needed the money for his boat payments, Rue realized. "Vivian, you said the boat wasn't paid for?" He still owed $60,000. The payments were eating up most of his retirement income. Copper suddenly stood up and walked to the office door, his body alert and focused. "Someone's coming," Rue said. Through the boarded window, they could hear footsteps on the stairs leading to the office level. "That's not the police," Jake said quietly. "They would have announced themselves." The footsteps stopped outside Webb's office door. Then they heard the sound of a key being inserted into the lock. "Who else has keys to this office?" Rue whispered. "Marina," Vivian said, "and Her face went pale. The maintenance staff. The door handle turned and Tony Markelli stepped into the office. He was a stocky man in his 40s, wearing work clothes and carrying a tool bag. When he saw them, his face went through several expressions before settling on something that looked like panic. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. "We could ask you the same thing," Jake said, stepping protectively closer to Rue and Vivian. Marcelli's gaze fell on the papers spread across Webb's desk and the open safe. "You shouldn't be looking at that stuff." "Why?" "Because it proves you and Webb were stealing from the yacht club? You don't understand. It wasn't supposed to go this far." "How far was it supposed to go?" Rue asked. Marcelli set down his tool bag, but his hand stayed near it. "Webb said just a few projects, just enough to help the club through a rough patch. He said nobody would get hurt. Except Tyler Nash, who you set up to take the fall." "That wasn't my idea." When Webb started getting paranoid about Marina asking questions, he came up with the plan to plant evidence in the kid's apartment. Vivian stood up from Webb's chair. "You killed my husband?" "I didn't mean to," Marcelli said desperately. "He called me Saturday morning, said Marina was getting too close to the truth, and he was going to blame everything on me. Said he had documentation that would make it look like I forced him into the scheme." "So you came here to stop him?" "I came here to reason with him." But he wouldn't listen. He said he'd already transferred the money offshore, and there was nothing I could do about it. Jake was slowly reaching for his phone. "So, you hit him?" "We fought. He tried to grab something to use as a weapon, and I just reacted. I didn't mean to hit him so hard." Marcelli's hand was now resting on his tool bag, and Rue realized they were in trouble. The bag was heavy enough to contain whatever he'd used to kill Webb, and they were alone with him. "Tony," she said carefully, "you need to call the police and turn yourself in. Tyler Nash is about to be charged with Webb's murder." "I can't go to prison." "My wife, my kids." Markelli's voice was getting more agitated. "Nobody was supposed to get hurt." Copper suddenly stepped between Rue and Marcelli, his body tense and alert. Not aggressive, but clearly protective. "You need to leave," Marcelli said, reaching into his tool bag. "All of you, and forget what you found here." Chapter 9. The Frame. "Tony," Rue said, keeping her voice steady while her heart hammered against her ribs, "you need to call the police. Tyler's about to be charged with murder." "I can't go to prison?" "My wife, my kids." Marcelli's voice cracked. Nobody was supposed to get hurt. "But people did get hurt," Vivian said, standing up from behind Webb's desk. Her grief had transformed into something harder, angrier. "You hurt Tyler. You hurt Marina. You hurt everyone who trusted this club." Marcelli's hand tightened on his tool bag. "You don't understand what Webb was like. He had everything planned out, even had documents ready to pin it all on Marina if things went south." "What documents?" Jake asked, but Rue was already looking back at the safe. In their rush to examine the bank statements and correspondence, they'd missed something in the bottom. A manila folder marked Insurance M. Martinez. Copper, who had been standing protectively between them and Marcelli, suddenly moved toward the safe and sat down in front of it, tail wagging once. "There's more in there," Rue said. "Don't touch anything else," Marcelli warned, but Vivian was already reaching for the folder. Inside were documents that made Rue's blood run cold. Forged invoices with Marina's signature, fake vendor receipts made out to companies that didn't exist, and what looked like bank deposit slips showing money going into an account with Marina's name on it. "Webb forged Marina's signature," Vivian said, her voice shaking with rage. "All of these documents, they're fake." "Webb was good at that," Marcelli said bitterly. "Had me convinced Marina was skimming money on the side, that all I was doing was taking my fair share." "So you believed him?" "I wanted to believe him. My business was failing. My wife needed surgery we couldn't afford. When Webb offered me work and said the yacht club could absorb a little extra expense, it seemed like everyone would win." Jake edged slightly closer to Rue. "But then it got bigger." "Webb got greedy, started talking about major renovations that would bring in serious money. Said we could milk the insurance company, create problems that needed expensive fixes." "Insurance fraud," Rue said. "I told him I was done. That's when he showed me these documents, said if I backed out, he'd make sure Marina took the fall for everything we'd already done." Vivian was still going through the forged papers. "There's a letter here." "Addressed to the police." She held up a typed letter on Yacht Club letterhead, signed with what looked like Webb's signature. Rue read over her shoulder and felt sick. The letter detailed suspicious activity by Marina Martinez, including unexplained cash deposits, vendor payments to questionable companies, and bookkeeping irregularities that suggested embezzlement. It painted Marina as a desperate single mother who'd been stealing from the club to support her family. "He was going to destroy her," Vivian whispered. "Webb said it was just insurance," Marcelli said desperately. "He said if anyone got too close to the truth, he'd blame Marina and we'd both disappear. Start fresh somewhere else." "But you killed him instead." "I panicked. Saturday morning, he called and said Marina was asking too many questions about the missing money. Said he was going to send that letter to the police and plant evidence in Tyler's apartment to make it look like Marina had an accomplice." Copper suddenly stood up and moved to the office window, his body alert and focused. Through the boards, they could hear voices in the parking lot below. "That might be the police," Jake said hopefully. But Marcelli was shaking his head. "They don't know I'm here. Webb told me to come clean out anything that could connect me to the fraud. Said he'd already taken care of the Tyler problem." "You planted the money and checkbook in Tyler's apartment before you killed Webb?" "Webb did that Friday night, gave Tyler some story about extra work, got a copy of his apartment key. We were supposed to wait until the police found the evidence, then Webb would discover discrepancies in the books that pointed to Marina." Rue felt a chill of understanding. "But you didn't trust him." "Saturday morning, I realized Webb was setting me up too. The letter to the police didn't just blame Marina. It mentioned a local contractor who'd been inflating bills. Webb was planning to throw us both under the bus and disappear with all the money." "So you confronted him." "I came here to demand my share of the money before he could skip town. Found him in this office, transferring funds to some offshore account. He laughed when I asked for my cut, said I was too stupid to deserve anything." Vivian's hands were shaking as she held the forged documents. "How much money are we talking about?" "Almost 90,000 total. Webb had it all moved to accounts I couldn't touch." The voices in the parking lot were getting closer. Copper moved away from the window and positioned himself between Marcelli and the door. "Tony," Jake said carefully, "you need to tell the police what really happened. Tyler Nash is innocent, and Marina doesn't deserve to have her life destroyed by Webb's lies." "I know that. But if I confess, my family loses everything. My wife's medical bills, my kids' college funds, it's all gone." "If you don't confess, an innocent kid goes to prison for murder," Rue said. Marcelli was quiet for a long moment, his hand still resting on the tool bag. Then they heard footsteps on the stairs again, multiple sets this time. "Mr. Marcelli?" Officer Castillo's voice echoed up the stairwell. "We know you're up there." "We need to talk." Marcelli's face went pale. "How did they—" "Your truck's in the parking lot," Jake said, "and you're supposed to be at the police station for questioning about the contractor fraud." "Tony Marcelli," Castillo called again. "Come out with your hands visible." Marcelli looked around the office like a trapped animal. The only exit was the door, where the police were waiting, and the boarded-up window where Webb had fallen to his death. "Don't make this worse than it already is," Vivian said. "My husband was a thief and a liar, but he didn't deserve to die. And Tyler Nash doesn't deserve to pay for crimes he didn't commit." "Neither does Marina," Rue added. "Look at those documents. Webb was going to destroy her reputation, her career, everything she's worked for." Marcelli stared at the forged papers spread across Webb's desk. "Marina's a good person." "She didn't know anything about what we were doing." "Then don't let Webb's plan work," Jake said. "Don't let him destroy her from beyond the grave." The footsteps had reached the top of the stairs. "Mr. Marcelli, we're coming in." Marcelli closed his eyes and took his hand away from the tool bag. "I'll tell them everything," he said. "About Webb, about the money, about how Tyler was set up." "And Marina?" Vivian asked. "And Marina. She deserves to know the truth about what Webb was planning to do to her." The door opened and Officer Castillo stepped in, followed by two other officers. She took in the scene, the forged documents spread across the desk, the open safe, the three civilians standing behind Webb's chair. "Mr. Marcelli," she said calmly, "you're under arrest for the murder of Harrison Webb. You have the right to remain silent." As Castillo read Marcelli his rights, Vivian gathered up the forged documents. "Officer, you need to see these. They prove Tyler Nash is innocent, and they show what my husband was planning to do to Marina Martinez." Castillo glanced at the papers, then at Rue and Jake. I told you two to stay out of this investigation. We were helping Vivian search her husband's office, Rue said. As his widow, she has the legal right. We'll sort out the legalities later, Castillo interrupted. Right now, I need all of you to come to the station and give formal statements about what happened here. As they prepared to leave Webb's office, Rue realized that Copper was still sitting by the safe, looking expectant. What is it, boy? Did we miss something? She looked back into the safe and saw a small key taped to the bottom. Vivian, does this look familiar? Vivian examined the key. It's for a safety deposit box. There's a number engraved on it. She looked at Castillo. Officer, I think my husband had another hiding place. Chapter 10. Desperate measures. The safety deposit box key led them to First National Bank, where Vivian's widow status and a court order got them access to what Webb had been hiding. The box contained more forged documents, offshore account information, and a USB drive that made Castillo whistle low under her breath. How much money are we talking about? She asked the bank manager. The documents show transfers totaling just over $200,000, he replied, spread across 3 different offshore accounts. Rue felt her stomach drop. $200,000 was a lot more than the $70,000 they'd found evidence of in Webb's office. Where did all that money come from? Jake asked. Vivian was staring at the offshore banking documents like they were written in a foreign language. I had no idea. None. How could he move that much money without me knowing? The transfers happened over 18 months, Castillo said, studying the paperwork. Small amounts at first, then larger chunks in recent months. Mrs. Webb, did your husband handle all your financial accounts? We kept things separate after we got married. I managed the household expenses. He handled his business accounts and investments. Vivian's voice was barely above a whisper. I trusted him completely. They were still at the bank when Castillo's radio crackled to life. Officer Castillo, we need you back at the station. Marina Martinez is here asking to speak with you about Harrison Webb's murder. Castillo looked at Rue and Jake. You two are coming with me. I have a feeling this conversation is going to need witnesses. Marina was waiting in the police station's small conference room, looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap, and she kept glancing at the door like she was thinking about running. Marina, Castillo said, settling into the chair across from her, you wanted to talk about Harrison Webb's murder? I lied, Marina said simply, about Saturday morning, about the last time I saw him. Rue and Jake took seats along the wall, with Copper lying quietly at Rue's feet. Whatever Marina was about to tell them, Rue had the feeling it was going to change everything they thought they knew about Webb's death. What did you lie about? Castillo asked. I said the last time I saw Harrison was Friday afternoon. But that's not true. I went to his office Saturday morning before the regatta. What time? Around 10:15. I'd been up all night going through the bank statements, trying to figure out where the missing money went. I'd found some things that didn't make sense. What kind of things? Marina pulled a folder from her purse and spread papers across the table. Vendor payments to companies I'd never heard of. Checks signed by Harrison that I hadn't written. Deposits that didn't match our registration records. Rue leaned forward to look at the papers. Marina's handwriting was precise, methodical, with questions written in the margins next to highlighted discrepancies. I realized Saturday morning that someone had been stealing from the club for months, Marina continued. Maybe longer. At first, I thought it might be an external fraud. Someone had gotten access to our accounts somehow. But then you realized it was internal, Jake said. I realized it had to be someone with check signing authority and access to our vendor database. That meant Harrison or me, and I knew it wasn't me. Castillo was taking notes. So you confronted him. I went to his office to ask him about the discrepancies. I thought maybe there was an explanation I was missing, or maybe he discovered the fraud and was handling it quietly. Marina was quiet for a moment, staring at her hands. When she spoke again, her voice was shaking. Harrison was at his computer when I got there. He had spreadsheets open, banking websites, financial documents I'd never seen before. When he saw me, he tried to close everything, but I'd already seen enough. What did you see? Account balances that were way higher than they should have been. Transfer confirmations, foreign bank routing numbers. Marina looked up at Castillo. I asked him what was going on, and he told me I was imagining things. Said I was incompetent and paranoid, and if I didn't trust him to manage the club's finances, Maybe I should find another job. How did you respond to that? I told him I'd been doing bookkeeping for 15 years, and I knew what fraud looked like. I said I was going to call the police and report the missing money. Marina stopped talking and wrapped her arms around herself. Rue could see her hands shaking. What happened then? Castillo asked gently. Harrison got angry, really angry. He said if I made trouble for him, he'd make sure I never worked in this town again. Said he had documentation that would prove I'd been stealing from the club, and everyone would believe him over me. Did he show you this documentation? He opened his safe and pulled out a folder with my name on it. Inside were bank statements, deposit slips, vendor receipts, all with my signature. But I'd never seen any of those documents before. Jake was quiet for a moment. He'd forged your signature. I realized that later. At the time, I was just terrified. Here was my boss showing me documents that made it look like I'd been embezzling money, and I had no way to prove they were fake. So what did you do? I panicked. I told Harrison I wouldn't say anything about the missing money if he'd destroy the fake documents and stop whatever he was doing. I begged him not to ruin my reputation over something I didn't do. Marina was crying now, quiet tears that she wiped away with the back of her hand. Harrison laughed at me. He said I was pathetic, that I should be grateful he was giving me a chance to walk away quietly, but then he said something that made me realize he wasn't planning to let me walk away at all. What did he say? He said Tyler Nash was young and stupid and would make a perfect accomplice for my embezzlement scheme. Said he'd already planted evidence in Tyler's apartment, and once the police found it, they'd arrest both of us for stealing from the club. Copper suddenly lifted his head and looked at Marina, with what Rue could only describe as sympathy. Even the dog seemed to understand that Marina had been caught in an impossible situation. You realized Webb was going to frame you no matter what you did, Rue said. I realized he'd been planning this for months. Setting me up to take the fall while he disappeared with all the money. Tyler was just collateral damage, a way to make the story more believable. So you fought with him? Marina was quiet for a long moment. We argued. I told him he couldn't destroy two innocent people just to cover up his crimes. He said he could do whatever he wanted because no one would believe a desperate secretary over a respected commodore. And then? He turned back to his computer and started typing. Said he was sending an email to the police about suspicious activity in the club's finances. I could see the screen. It was a formal complaint accusing me of embezzlement. Marina stopped talking and stared at the table. Castillo waited patiently for her to continue. I grabbed his arm to stop him from sending the email. He shoved me away and I stumbled backward. When I tried to steady myself, I knocked over this heavy glass trophy from his shelf. The one shaped like a boat anchor, Jake said. Yes. Harrison saw me pick it up and he got scared. Said I was threatening him and he was going to call security, but I wasn't threatening him. I was just trying to put the trophy back on the shelf. What happened next? Harrison lunged at me, trying to grab the trophy. We struggled and... Marina closed her eyes. I don't remember exactly what happened. We were fighting over the trophy, and then suddenly he was on the floor and there was blood. The conference room was quiet except for the sound of Marina's shaky breathing. I checked his pulse, she whispered. He was still alive, but he was unconscious and bleeding from his head. I should have called for help right then, but I panicked. What did you do? I ran. Left him there and ran back to the registration area. I thought maybe he'd be okay. That head injuries always looked worse than they were. I kept telling myself he'd wake up and be fine. Castillo leaned forward. Marina, Harrison Webb didn't die from the head injury. He died from the fall out his office window. Marina looked up sharply. What? The medical examiner determined that Webb was unconscious when he went out the window. Someone moved his body after you left him in the office. But I thought I'd killed him when he hit his head. You knocked him unconscious. Someone else finished the job. Chapter 11. Breaking point. The silence in the conference room stretched until Castillo finally broke it. Marina, I need you to think carefully. After you left Webb unconscious in his office, did you see anyone else heading toward the building? Anyone who might have gone up to check on him? Marina wiped her eyes and tried to focus. I was too panicked to pay attention to much. I just wanted to get back to the registration table and pretend nothing had happened. But you must have seen something, Jake pressed gently. You were outside, walking from the office building to the clubhouse. There were people around. Members getting ready for the regatta, volunteers setting up, I wasn't really looking at anyone specifically. Rue had been quiet, but now she leaned forward. Marina, when you left Webb's office, was the window open? No, it was closed. He always kept it closed because of the air conditioning. So, whoever found Webb unconscious opened that window, Castillo said, and pushed him out. Marina shuddered. I keep thinking if I'd called for help instead of running away, maybe he'd still be alive. Or maybe you'd both be dead, Rue said bluntly. If someone was willing to murder an unconscious man, they probably wouldn't have hesitated to silence a witness. Castillo was making notes. Marina, think about Webb's phone calls, his meetings, anyone he seemed nervous around lately. Who else knew about the financial problems? Well, Sophia knew some of it. She'd been asking questions about the budget. Anyone else? Marina hesitated. Tyler might have overheard things. He helped with registration sometimes, had access to some of the financial paperwork. What about the contractor? Marcelli? Marcelli was in and out of the building a lot over the past few months. He could have overheard conversations, seen documents. Marina paused. But you already arrested him for the murder. We arrested him for conspiracy and fraud, Castillo corrected. His confession doesn't match the physical evidence. He says he killed Webb during a fight in the office, but the ME's report shows Webb died from the fall, not from blunt force trauma. Rue felt pieces clicking together in her mind. Castillo, what time did Marcelli say he fought with Webb? Around 10:30 Saturday morning. But Marina was there at 10:15. If Marcelli had shown up at 10:30 and found Webb unconscious from his fight with Marina, he might have panicked and decided to stage the accident. Or he might have seen an opportunity to eliminate the one person who could expose his fraud, Jake added. Marina looked confused, but Marcelli confessed. He said he killed Webb. Marcelli confessed to hitting Webb in a fight, Castillo said, but that might not be what actually killed him. The evidence suggests Webb was unconscious when he went out the window. So Marcelli found Webb knocked out and decided to finish the job? It's possible. Or someone else entirely found Webb and saw a chance to solve their own problems. Copper, who had been lying quietly at Rue's feet, suddenly stood up and walked to the conference room window. His body was alert, focused on something outside. What is it, boy? Rue asked. Through the window, she could see the police station parking lot. A familiar figure was getting out of a car, Vivian Webb, moving quickly toward the building entrance. Mrs. Webb is here, Rue said. A few minutes later, Vivian appeared in the conference room doorway, her face flushed and her eyes bright with anger. I want to know why you're harassing Marina instead of focusing on the real criminals, she said without preamble. I've been talking to the Yacht Club members, and half of them saw Marcelli's truck at the club Saturday morning. Mrs. Webb, Castillo said calmly, please sit down. We're just trying to establish a timeline of events. The timeline is simple. Tony Marcelli and my husband were stealing money from the club. When my husband tried to back out or threatened to expose him, Marcelli killed him. Vivian's voice was shaking with emotion. Marina is a victim here, not a criminal. Marina looked at Vivian with surprise and gratitude. Thank you for saying that. It's the truth. I've spent the last 2 days going through every document in that office safe, and it's clear that my husband was planning to destroy your reputation to save himself. You had every right to defend yourself. Mrs. Webb, Castillo interrupted, we appreciate your support for Marina, but we still need to establish exactly what happened Saturday morning. What happened is that my husband got greedy and stupid, and it got him killed. End of story. But Rue was studying Vivian's face, and something didn't add up. Vivian, how did you know Marina was here giving a statement? Someone at the yacht club mentioned seeing police cars at the station. I assumed it was about the investigation. But how did you know Marina was specifically being questioned? Vivian hesitated just long enough for Rue to notice. I saw her car in the parking lot. Her car? Marina's car, the blue Honda. Marina looked confused. I don't drive a blue Honda. I have a white Camry. The room went very quiet. Vivian's face had gone pale. Mrs. Webb, Castillo said carefully, whose blue Honda did you see? I must have been mistaken about the car. But Rue was remembering something. Jake, didn't Tom Brennan say he saw a woman in a car near Mrs. Delacroix's house? An older woman who looked like she'd been crying? He said she was driving a white sedan, Jake said slowly. But that was during the Princess case. Vivian, Rue said, what kind of car do you drive? a white sedan. And where were you Saturday morning during the regatta? Vivian's composure was cracking. I was at home. I told you I don't like sailing events. But your husband was racing. Didn't you want to watch him? No, I had things to do at home. Copper had moved away from the window and was now sitting directly in front of Vivian's chair, staring at her with the kind of focused attention that made Rue's skin prickle. Vivian, Castillo said, I think we need to have a longer conversation. About Saturday morning, about your husband's financial activities, and about exactly when you found out what he was planning to do to Marina. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do. I think you've known about your husband's fraud for a while. I think you knew he was planning to frame Marina and Tyler, and I think you went to his office Saturday morning to confront him about it. That's ridiculous. I would never. You would never let him destroy innocent people? Rue interrupted. Even if it meant covering up his crimes? Vivian stared at them for a long moment, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. You don't understand, she whispered finally. I tried to stop him. I begged him to just return the money and confess, but he said it was too late, that the only way out was to let Marina and Tyler take the blame. So you went to his office that morning. I was going to give him an ultimatum. Either he confessed to the police or I would do it for him. Marina was staring at Vivian in shock. You were there Saturday morning? After I left? I got there around 11. The regatta had started, and I knew he'd be alone in his office, probably transferring more money to those offshore accounts. What did you find when you got there? Vivian closed her eyes. I found him on the floor, unconscious and bleeding. At first I thought he'd had a stroke or a heart attack, but then I saw the trophy on the floor next to him, and there was blood on it. What did you do? I checked his pulse. He was alive but unconscious. I should have called 911, but all I could think about was Marina and Tyler, and how my husband was going to destroy their lives even if he was in a coma. The room was dead silent now. So you opened the window, Castillo said. Vivian nodded, tears streaming down her face. I told myself he was going to die anyway from the head injury. But that wasn't really why I did it. I did it because even unconscious, even dying, he was still going to take Marina and Tyler down with him. Mrs. Webb, Castillo said gently, you're under arrest for the murder of Harrison Webb. Chapter 12. Staging the scene. After Castillo read Vivian her rights, she sat back down in the conference room chair and seemed to deflate. The anger was gone, replaced by something that looked like relief. I need to tell you the rest of it, Vivian said quietly, about what I did after. Mrs. Webb, you should wait for a lawyer. No, I've been carrying this around for days, and I can't anymore. Vivian looked at Marina. You deserve to know what really happened. Castillo glanced at Rue and Jake, then back at Vivian. All right. Tell us. When I found him on the floor, unconscious, my first thought was to call 911, but then I saw those documents spread out on his desk. The forged bank statements with Marina's signature, the fake receipts, that horrible letter he was going to send to the police. Vivian's hands were shaking as she spoke. I realized that even if he survived the head injury, even if he went to prison for fraud, those documents would still destroy Marina's reputation. People would always wonder if she was really innocent. So you decided to destroy the evidence, Jake said. I decided to destroy him? Vivian's voice was barely above a whisper. I opened the window and I pushed him out. Marina made a small sound and covered her mouth. He was completely unconscious. I kept telling myself he couldn't feel anything, that he was probably going to die from the head wound anyway. Vivian wiped her eyes. But that's not why I did it. I did it because I was furious that he was willing to destroy innocent people to save himself. What did you do with the evidence? Castillo asked. I gathered up all the forged documents and put them back in the safe. I thought if he was dead, no one would ever find them, and Marina and Tyler would be safe. But you didn't count on us searching his office, Rue said. I didn't count on a lot of things. Like Tony Marcelli confessing to murder, or Marina coming forward with the truth about Saturday morning. Vivian looked at Marina again. I'm so sorry you've been carrying the guilt of thinking you killed him. That was never supposed to happen. Why didn't you just destroy the forged documents? Jake asked. I thought about it. But I realized that if those papers disappeared, it might look suspicious. Better to leave everything exactly as he'd arranged it and let people assume he'd died accidentally. Castillo was taking notes. Walk me through what you did after you pushed him out the window. Vivian closed her eyes. I looked down and saw him lying in the landscaping. I could tell he was dead. His neck was bent at an unnatural angle. I wiped down the trophy that Marina had hit him with, put it back on the shelf, and made sure the office looked normal. Then what? I closed the window, locked the office, and went home. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought people would assume he'd had an accident during the regatta. But instead, Marcelli confessed to killing him, Rue said. When I heard about Tony's confession, I was confused. I knew he hadn't killed Harrison because Harrison was already unconscious when I found him, but I couldn't figure out why Tony would confess to something he didn't do. Until we found the fraud evidence, Jake said. Then I understood. Tony was confessing to protect himself from fraud charges, not realizing that the evidence of his financial crimes was still in Harrison's safe. Marina had been quiet during Vivian's confession, but now she spoke up. Why didn't you just let Tony take the blame? He was guilty of fraud, even if he didn't commit murder. Vivian looked surprised by the question. Because it wasn't true. And because letting an innocent person go to prison for murder makes me as bad as Harrison was. But Tyler was about to be charged. Tyler's charges were based on planted evidence. Once the truth about Harrison's frame job came out, Tyler would have been cleared. But if Tony had been convicted of murder... Vivian shook her head. I couldn't live with that. Copper, who had been lying quietly during the conversation, suddenly got up and walked over to Vivian. Instead of his usual alert posture, he sat down beside her chair and rested his head against her leg. Even the dog seemed to understand that Vivian was more victim than villain. What happens now? Marina asked. Now Mrs. Webb is formally charged with murder, Castillo said, and you and Tyler are cleared of all charges related to Harrison's death and the financial crimes. What about the yacht club? What about all the money Harrison stole? That's complicated. The offshore accounts will take time to recover if we can recover them at all, but the club won't face any legal liability for Harrison's actions. Vivian looked up. There's insurance, life insurance that should cover most of what Harrison stole, plus some of the club's operating expenses. You're willing to let the insurance money go to the yacht club? Rue asked. It's not my money. It never was. Vivian's voice was steady now. Harrison stole from that club for months. The least I can do is make sure they get some compensation. As they prepared to leave the conference room, Vivian turned to Marina one last time. I want you to know that none of this was your fault. Harrison created this situation with his greed and his lies. You were just trying to protect yourself and do the right thing. Marina was crying again, but quietly. Thank you. For stopping him, for protecting me and Tyler. I wish I'd found another way. There wasn't another way. He would never have stopped. Outside the police station, Jake and Rue stood in the parking lot with Copper, watching as Vivian was transported to the county jail for booking. That was brutal, Jake said. Yeah, but necessary. Rue looked down at Copper, who was sitting calmly beside her. What do you think, detective? Justice served? Copper's tail wagged once, which she'd learned meant yes, but he looked tired. Even detective work was exhausting when it involved this much human pain. So what now? Jake asked. Back to normal life? Whatever that means after something like this. I don't know if there is a normal life after this. Marina's going to need time to heal from the trauma. Tyler's going to need help rebuilding his reputation. The yacht club's going to need new leadership. And you? What do you need? Rue considered the question. A week ago, she would have said she needed to get back to her quiet, uninvolved life. But something had changed during this investigation. Maybe it was seeing Marina's courage in coming forward with the truth. Maybe it was watching Vivian make an impossible choice to protect innocent people. Or maybe it was just realizing that being part of a community meant sometimes getting involved in messy, complicated situations. I think I need a drink, she said finally. And maybe a long conversation about what the hell we're going to do with ourselves now? Jake smiled. I know a place. Murphy's Pub. Fair warning, though. The beer's cold, but the conversation can get pretty deep after a few rounds. Deep conversation? Rue looked at him suspiciously. Are you planning to get all philosophical on me, Dr. Torino? Maybe a little. Is that a problem? Rue looked at Copper, who was watching their exchange with obvious interest. The dog had been through a murder investigation, helped solve a complex fraud case, and somehow managed to provide emotional support to both victims and perpetrators along the way. If Copper could handle philosophical conversations, maybe she could too. "Lead the way," she said, "but I'm buying the first round. After everything we've been through, I think we've earned it." As they walked toward Jake's truck, Rue realized that her quiet, uninvolved life in Florida had officially come to an end. But looking at Jake and down at Copper trotting contentedly between them, she thought maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. Besides, Pelican Cove was a small town. How much trouble could they possibly get into? Copper looked up at her and wagged his tail, and Rue had the distinct impression that he was laughing at her naivety. "Don't answer that," she told him. "I really don't want to know." Chapter 13. Community Response. 2 weeks after Vivian Webb's arrest, Pelican Cove was still buzzing with the kind of gossip that only a small town could generate. Rue discovered this when she walked into harbor grounds and found herself at the center of more attention than she'd ever wanted. "There she is," Stella called out from behind the counter. "Our very own detective. Ruby, honey, everyone's been wanting to meet you." The coffee shop was more crowded than Rue had ever seen it, and she recognized several faces from the yacht club. All of them were looking at her with the kind of expectant interest that made her want to turn around and walk right back out. "I'm not a detective," she said, making her way to the counter. "I just have a nosy dog." "That nosy dog helped solve a murder," said a voice behind her. She turned to see Sophia Reyes approaching with a warm smile. "The whole town's grateful for what you did." "What we all did. Marina deserves most of the credit for having the courage to tell the truth." Sophia nodded. "How is Marina doing?" "I heard she's taking some time off." "She's okay. Still processing everything, but she's getting help. The yacht club's been supportive." "Speaking of the yacht club," Sophia lowered her voice, "we're having an emergency board meeting this afternoon to discuss new leadership. I don't suppose you'd be interested in joining the board? We could use someone with your investigative skills." Rue almost choked on her coffee. "I don't know anything about boats." "You know about people, and right now, that's more important than sailing experience." Before Rue could respond, the door chimed and Tyler Nash walked in, looking more relaxed than she'd seen him since the whole mess started. He spotted her and came over immediately. "Rue? I've been hoping to run into you. I wanted to thank you again for everything you did." "Tyler, you don't need to keep thanking me. I'm just glad the truth came out." "Well, I have some good news." "The Yacht Club board voted unanimously to clear my record and give me a full recommendation, and I got a job offer from a yacht design firm in Fort Lauderdale." "That's wonderful. Are you going to take it?" Tyler glanced around the coffee shop, taking in the friendly faces and interested conversations. "I'm thinking about it. But honestly, Pelican Cove's starting to grow on me, especially now that I'm not worried about being framed for murder." The bell above the door chimed again, and Jake walked in, scanning the crowd until he spotted Rue. He made his way through the cluster of people, nodding to familiar faces as he passed. "Morning, celebrity," he said, settling into the chair beside her. "How are you handling the fame?" "Badly. I came here for coffee, not a fan club meeting." "That's what happens when you solve your first murder case." "Fair warning, it only gets worse." "First murder case?" Rue gave him a look. "There's not going to be a second murder case. This was a one-time thing." Jake's smile suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. "If you say so." Sophia was still standing nearby, apparently waiting for an answer to her board invitation. "Ruby, just think about it. The yacht club needs fresh perspective, and honestly, we need someone who isn't afraid to ask hard questions." "I'll think about it," Rue said, though she was already mentally declining. Getting involved in yacht club politics seemed like a fast track to more drama, and she'd had enough drama to last a lifetime. "Great. The meeting's at 3 this afternoon if you change your mind." After Sophia left, Jake leaned back in his chair and studied Rue's face. "You're not going to that meeting, are you?" "Definitely not. I've learned my lesson about getting involved in local politics. This isn't politics. It's community service." "Same thing, different name." Jake was quiet for a moment. "You know, the yacht club isn't the only organization in town that could use someone with your skills." "Jake, the animal shelter's looking for board members." And there's a literacy program at the library that... Stop trying to recruit me for things. I'm not looking to become Pelican Cove's volunteer coordinator. I'm not trying to recruit you. I'm just saying there are a lot of ways to be part of a community without getting involved in murder investigations. Rue was about to respond when Copper, who had been lying quietly at her feet, suddenly stood up and walked to the window. His body language was alert but not alarmed, more interested than concerned. "What's he looking at?" Jake asked. Through the window, they could see a police car pulling up outside. Officer Castillo got out and headed toward the coffee shop entrance. "Maybe she's just getting coffee," Rue said hopefully. But when Castillo walked through the door and immediately scanned the room until she found Rue, it was clear this wasn't a social visit. "Ms. Castellano, Mr. Torino," Castillo said, approaching their table. "I was hoping to find you both here." "Is everything okay?" Jake asked. "That depends. How do you feel about consulting work?" Rue felt a familiar sinking sensation in her stomach. "What kind of consulting work?" "The kind that involves missing persons, suspicious circumstances, and a dog with apparently excellent investigative instincts." Castillo glanced down at Copper, who was now sitting beside Rue's chair with his tail wagging. "We've got a situation in the next town over, and the sheriff there heard about your success with the Webb case." "I thought you said you didn't want amateur investigators interfering in police business," Rue said. "I said I didn't want amateurs interfering." "But you're not amateurs anymore, are you? You solved a murder that had 3 different people confessing to crimes they didn't commit. That takes skill." Jake was looking interested despite himself. "What kind of missing person case?" "Elderly woman. Disappeared from an assisted living facility 3 days ago. No signs of foul play, but the circumstances are unusual. She left behind a note that doesn't make much sense, and her family's convinced something's not right." "Why do you need us?" "Don't you have detectives who handle missing persons?" "We do. But this particular missing person owned 12 cats, and the cats are missing too. The detective assigned to the case is not good with animals." Copper's ears perked up at the mention of cats, and he looked at Rue with obvious interest. "Absolutely not," Rue said firmly. "I'm not getting involved in another investigation. I came to Florida for peace and quiet, remember?" "The family's offering a reward," Castillo said. "Well, $5,000. "I don't care about the money." "The cats haven't been fed in 3 days. They're probably scared, hiding, maybe injured." Rue felt her resolve weakening. She looked down at Copper, who was now staring at her with the kind of expression that suggested he was already mentally packing his investigative gear. "This is just a missing person case, right? Not another murder?" "As far as we know, yes." "Just a missing person case." "With 12 missing cats," Jake added. "That's a lot of animals to relocate without help." Rue sighed. "When do you need an answer?" "I'm driving over there this afternoon. If you're interested, you could ride along and take a look at the situation. No commitment. Just take a look. Just take a look." Copper stood up and walked to the door, then sat down and looked back at them expectantly. "I think someone's made up his mind," Jake said. Rue looked at Copper, then at Castillo's hopeful expression, then at Jake's encouraging smile. 3 weeks in paradise, and she was already being recruited for her second case. "Fine," she said, "but I'm not promising anything. We'll take a look, that's all." "That's all I'm asking?" As Castillo headed back to her car, Jake turned to Rue with a grin. "So much for your quiet, uninvolved life in Florida." "Don't say I told you so." "I wasn't going to say I told you so. I was going to say, welcome to the team." Rue looked down at Copper, who was practically vibrating with excitement at the prospect of another adventure. "What have we gotten ourselves into?" she asked him. Copper's tail wagged enthusiastically, which she was pretty sure meant they were about to find out. Chapter 14. New Beginnings. The Yacht Club's reopening celebration was exactly the kind of event Rue would have avoided 3 weeks ago. Too many people, too much small talk, too much chance of getting dragged into someone else's drama. But here she was on a warm Friday evening, standing on the club's deck with a glass of wine and actually enjoying herself. "You look surprised," Jake said, joining her at the railing where she was watching boats come and go in the harbor. "I am surprised. 3 weeks ago, I would have made an excuse not to come to this." "What changed your mind?" Rue considered the question while watching Copper explore the deck, greeting club members like he was running for mayor. I guess I realized that avoiding people doesn't actually make life simpler. It just makes it lonelier. Profound revelation from someone who moved to Florida to become a hermit. Don't get cocky. I'm still planning to be antisocial at least 60% of the time. Jake laughed. I'll take 40% social Rue over 0% social Rue. Before she could respond to that, Sophia Reyes appeared beside them, looking relaxed for the first time since Rue had met her. Ruby, I'm so glad you came. Have you given any more thought to joining the board? I told you, I don't know anything about boats. And I told you that doesn't matter. We need someone who asks the right questions and isn't afraid of the answers. Sophia glanced around the busy deck. Speaking of which, Marina's here. She wanted to thank you again. Rue followed Sophia's gaze and spotted Marina near the buffet table, talking with Tyler and looking genuinely happy for the first time in weeks. The yacht club had voted unanimously to give Marina a raise and additional support staff, and she decided to stay on as secretary despite job offers from other organizations. She seems to be doing better, Jake observed. She is? Having the truth come out has helped more than I expected, and the club members have been incredibly supportive. What about Tyler? Is he staying in town? For now, he's working part-time at the yacht design firm remotely while helping out here as sailing instructor. Best of both worlds. Marina spotted them and came over looking like a different person from the scared, exhausted woman who'd confessed in the police station 2 weeks ago. Rue, Jake, I'm so glad you're here. I wanted to tell you that the club board has decided to name the new dock renovation project after you. After me? Why? Because if you hadn't investigated what happened to Harrison, I'd probably be in jail right now, and the club would still be hemorrhaging money from his fraud. You saved us twice over. Marina, I really don't need... It's not the Marina dock, Marina interrupted with a grin. It's the Copper dock. The board felt it was only appropriate to name it after the real detective. At the sound of his name, Copper trotted over and sat down beside Rue, tail wagging. He looked pleased with himself, though whether that was because of the dock dedication or the piece of shrimp he'd probably charmed off some unsuspecting club member was unclear. He's going to get a big head about this, Rue said. He's earned it, Sophia said. That dog solved a murder. We all solved a murder. It was a team effort. True. Which reminds me, I heard through the grapevine that you're consulting on another case. Something about missing cats? Rue shot a look at Jake, who was trying not to smile. News travels fast in small towns. Especially when Officer Castillo stops by the vet clinic to ask about your availability, Jake said. She wanted to make sure I could cover for you if you needed to be away for a few days. Away for a few days? She said we were just taking a look. Famous last words, Sophia said. Once word gets out that you're available for consulting, you're going to be busier than you think. Before Rue could protest that she wasn't available for consulting, a familiar voice called her name from across the deck. Ruby! There you are. Rue turned to see Vivian Webb approaching, and for a moment she wasn't sure how to react. Vivian had made bail pending her trial, but this was the first time Rue had seen her since the arrest. Vivian, how are you holding up? As well as can be expected, considering... Vivian looked around the crowded deck with a mixture of sadness and acceptance. I wanted to come tonight to see the club moving forward. Harrison would have hated that I'm here, but I think that's exactly why I needed to be. Are you doing okay? I mean, with the legal situation? My lawyer thinks I'll get a reduced sentence for voluntary manslaughter rather than murder, especially given the circumstances. And honestly, knowing that Marina and Tyler are safe makes whatever happens to me worthwhile. Marina had been listening to their conversation and now stepped forward to embrace Vivian. Thank you. For everything. Don't thank me for murder, Marina. Thank me for finally doing the right thing. I thank you for protecting me when I couldn't protect myself. The two women held each other for a moment and Rue felt her throat tighten. Whatever else had happened, Vivian's actions had saved Marina from a frame job that would have destroyed her life. Mrs. Webb, Tyler said, joining their group, I wanted to say, I know what you did was wrong, but I also know why you did it. And I'm grateful. Vivian nodded, tears in her eyes. You both deserve better than what Harrison was planning. I just wish I'd found a way to stop him that didn't involve... She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. You found the only way that was available, Rue said quietly. Sometimes there are no good choices, only necessary ones. As the evening wore on, the deck filled with laughter and conversation, the kind of comfortable noise that came from a community celebrating together. Rue found herself talking to people she'd never met, answering questions about the investigation, and somehow agreeing to join not one but two volunteer committees. You realize you've just committed yourself to the literacy program and the animal shelter fundraiser, Jake said when they finally found a quiet spot to sit down. How did that happen? I came here for wine and appetizers, not to become a community volunteer. It's a slippery slope. First you solve one murder, then you're organizing book drives and adoption events. Speaking of slippery slopes, what's this about you telling Castillo I'm available for consulting work? Jake had the grace to look slightly sheepish. She asked if you'd be interested in helping with other cases. I said you'd probably consider it if the circumstances were right. Jake, the circumstances being 12 hungry cats and an elderly woman who might be in trouble. Rue looked down at Copper, who was lying at her feet with the satisfied expression of a dog who'd been thoroughly spoiled by Yacht Club members all evening. What do you think, Detective? Ready for case number 2? Copper's tail thumped against the deck, which she chose to interpret as enthusiasm rather than food coma. I guess that settles it, she said. So you're officially accepting the consulting position? I'm officially accepting the case. Singular, one case. This doesn't make me a professional detective. Of course not. You're just a graphic designer who happens to be very good at solving crimes. With a dog who's apparently smarter than most police detectives. And a veterinarian partner who's excellent at asking the right questions. Rue looked at Jake, really looked at him, and realized that somewhere between the Yacht Club office and the police station, he'd stopped being just a friendly acquaintance and started being something more. A partner, definitely. A friend, absolutely. And maybe eventually something beyond that. Partner, she said, if you want. I mean, someone's got to keep you and Copper out of trouble. I think you've got that backwards. We're probably going to get you into more trouble than you've ever seen. I'm willing to risk it. The club's string lights had come on as the sun set, casting a warm glow over the deck and the harbor beyond. Music was playing softly, people were laughing and talking, and for the first time since she'd arrived in Pelican Cove, Rue felt like she was exactly where she belonged. So, Jake said, standing up and offering her his hand, ready to dance? I don't dance. I don't believe that. Seriously, I'm terrible at dancing. I'll step on your feet. I'm a veterinarian. I've been stepped on by animals much larger than you. I think I can handle it. Rue looked at his outstretched hand, then at the couples moving slowly to the music, then down at Copper, who was watching their interaction with obvious interest. 3 weeks ago, she would have said no. 3 weeks ago, she would have made an excuse and gone home to her cottage and her boxes of unpacked belongings. But 3 weeks ago, she'd been a different person. Someone who thought that staying uninvolved would keep her safe, that avoiding connections would make life simpler. Now she knew better. One dance, she said, taking his hand, but when I step on your feet, don't say I didn't warn you. As they moved onto the small dance floor, Rue caught sight of Marina and Tyler talking with Sophia near the bar, all of them smiling and relaxed. The Yacht Club had survived Harrison Webb's crimes and was moving forward stronger than before. And tomorrow, she and Jake and Copper would drive to the next town over to look for a missing elderly woman and her 12 cats. It wasn't the quiet, uninvolved life she'd planned when she moved to Florida, but as Jake spun her around and Copper watched approvingly from his spot by their table, Rue realized it was something much better. It was a life worth living.
Thank you for listening. Please visit me at winvalentine.com to stay up to date. Please subscribe, leave a comment, and review.